What is happening, guys? Coddy Plays here, bringing you another Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a tier list for the upcoming Season 19 in Master Duel. So, I just did a tier list a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't really a Season 18 tier list, it was more of a post-set release tier list video. But since then, we're coming into a new season, we've got a new ban list applied, and I thought it'd be like a good time to go ahead and update this, then maybe get on a more routine schedule where I'm doing one going into the season, and then maybe after a new set release. So maybe we're going to be doing 2 tier lists a month. Let me know down in the comment section below if that is too many. I can always switch it up and maybe do like a hand trap tier list, board breaker tier list, like rogue tier list, whatever it is you guys want is what I'll do. So let me know in the comment section down below what you want to see. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right on in. This is going to be a tier list focused on ladder play. So previously I've been doing tier list for tournaments, for like different war leagues and stuff like that, but I'm going to do this focused just on best of 1 ladder, and if that bleeds over into best of 3 territory, I'll talk about it. But the game is kind of like established at this point. Like, we've been playing the game for well over a year now, and it's not really going to be changing from best of 1. So I think it's time that I finally adapt and just focus on like ladder tier list. Maybe we can do like a tournament tier list at some other point, but for now we're focusing on ladder. But anyways, I'm rambling. Let's get into it with our first deck, Adamancipator. So Adamancipator is in an interesting spot. I want to put it down here in Rogue, and I don't want anyone to like misconstrue what I'm saying when I say Rogue. So the tiers, of course, are Tier 0, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Rogue, and then UR/SRCP. So basically unplayable in the current format. When it comes to Rogue, what that means to me is that this is a deck that you're not going to play very much. You're not going to play against it very much. But when you do, you can easily lose to it. If they draw very good, if they've got like a just advantageous matchup, if you aren't prepared for it, like if you don't know how to play against the deck, or if you haven't built your deck to counter a deck like this, but it's not a deck that you are going into the ladder thinking that you should try to counter. And right now, I think Adamancipator is in that place. I think there's other combo decks in the game right now that are just overall more prevalent than this. And I wouldn't even say like necessarily more combo decks, but there is one combo deck that's definitely more powerful and more like prevalent than this. But overall, the format's pretty mid-range, if we're being honest. So anyways, I hope that makes sense. And then, we'll just go up the tiers from there. And when I put a deck in a tier list, I'll kind of explain like what that tier is when we get to it. The next deck I want to talk about is Adagnister. So Adagnister, I think, is also a Rogue deck. This is not moved from the previous tier list. I put this in Rogue last time. I'm going to keep it here. And I think the reason being is just because there's so much like Goddess right now in the format. Sprites playing Goddess, Tiers playing Goddess, all the runic variations are playing Goddess. And the decks that aren't playing it don't always have the hardest time outing a card like Arrival. All things considered, Branded's pretty good at outing it. They can play Starving Venom. Not all of them are, but they can play it. They can play Ash Dragon. Not all of them are playing it, but they can. And they're playing Ad Libitum for the most part. An Ad Lib plus an Ash Dragon or Starving Venom, whatever it is, can out the Arrival fairly easily. And then the rest of its board loses to the most powerful board breakers in the format, which are cards like Evenly, which are cards like Super Poly, Dark Ruler, so on and so forth. It doesn't really seem to have the same like oomph to it that it used to have. Now, this might change. It also doesn't help that Bystials are in the format, and Bystials can hit your Math Mech plays. It can also hit some of your Adagnister plays. And overall, like the cyber strategies for the most part, the ones that are like more light or dark focused, are kind of in a weird place. The next deck is Eldritch. So if I recall correctly, this was not on the previous tier list that I did, but I wanted to put it on here anyways. I decided to put like a little branded symbol on here to indicate that it can be like branded Eldritch or like just pure Floodgate Eldritch. This deck is virtually unplayable. So the reason this is unplayable is because Bystials are so popular in the current format, and not only Bystials are popular, Runic's really popular. Not only that, but all the Floodgates are basically hit. And now Aliber's hit, Opening's hit, Branded Fusion's hit. So if you're going to play the more, combo variant of Eldritch, the variant that plays like maybe some Dogmatica cards, maybe some branded cards, and whatever it is, you're struggling with consistency. for both engines. Both engines in this deck are getting hurt very badly by the current state of the format. Zombie World's also not particularly strong right now. It's decent against some decks, but not good enough against Tier and Sprite and stuff like that to be something that you can like win games just because you're playing Zombie World, right? So moving on to the next thing, this is branded Tier. Part of the image is kind of cut off, but you can see down here in the bottom right, like Rukalis. So I'm actually going to put branded Tier in Tier 1. This is going to be the biggest change, I think, from the previous list. So I'm not going to I'm considering going more in depth on a deck like this in the coming weeks, like maybe do a deck profile on it. But the reason I think branded Tier is so strong, and really you could kind of say it the other way around, like Tier branded, but branded Tier sounds better. It's more of it's a Tier deck that plays the fusion deployments, Cartesia, Albion, Albaz, branded fusions. You don't play like a big Despia package. You don't play a big like quote-unquote branded package. You just play the Tier cards. Then you support them with very consistent, just powerful cards that come out of the branded strategy. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to make more consistent inboards than regular Tier does. Because regular Tier is in a very weird place. It's a very overall inconsistent deck when you think about the best deck in the game. When you think about like traditionally what the best decks in the game are, you think about like really hyper consistent, powerful decks. Tier is incredibly powerful, but it struggles very bad with consistency. And the hit to Soliak, it seems really stupid, but it is a consistency hit. It makes your mills worse. It makes your opening hand worse. If you open your one of Foolish Burial of Goods and you don't want to send your Soliak because you don't know if you're going to be able to get it back, if you don't know if you're going to mill a Heartbeat, you just might not be able to play, right? So it makes the inboard potentially weaker and the starting hands potentially weaker. So it just is what it is, right? It's a less consistent, top tier deck than we're used to. And branded Tier, like, honestly solves a lot of those problems. It might be the best deck in the game, but I don't know if I'm going to go that far quite yet. Then we have regular branded. I'm going to leave regular branded in Tier 3 currently. This might be a little too low. It may very well be like bottom of Tier 2, but I'm going to put it at the top of Tier 3 because the deck has so many issues that haven't been addressed and only have gotten worse. The deck still loses very hard to Ash Blossom, and the way the deck is able to beat Ash Blossom is by being a consistent deck outside of branded fusion. But, opening being hit, Alibur being hit, does not help with that consistency. You want to see, like, your other non-branded fusion cards that allow you to get to more fusion spells or get to more of your engine without sacrificing, your branded fusion. And not only is branded fusion like going to get hit by Ash like every single game, because that's what happens when he plays branded, but the rest of your deck is less consistent than it is in like the TCG, for example. And I know that's not a TCG discussion, but even there, like, the deck still struggles, right? Even though it's got everything unlimited basically except Expulsion, right? But overall, I love branded. It's one of my favorite decks in the game. I've been playing it a lot recently, and I just can't seem to get past the point of like if branded fusion gets Ash Blossom and you can't play, like if you don't have access to a Cartesia or some other line of play, then you literally just lose. So unfortunately, this is going to be stuck. I think it's probably going to be stuck in this purgatory of Tier 3, Tier 2 forever, because I don't know if there's a solve for like Ash Blossom being insane versus branded fusion, because Max C is always going to be in the format, so Ash Blossom is always going to be in the format. Therefore, branded is never going to be able to be the best deck, I don't think. The next deck is Bystial Dragon Link. So yeah, you can see the little rocket tracer a little bit on this one. Sorry, these images kind of suck. It looked weird on the last one. Like, my images were way too big last time, so I wanted to fix that. But now, trying to fix that, I made the images maybe a little bit too small. But anyways, whatever. Hopefully you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm going to keep Dragon Link at Tier 3, maybe Tier 2. The reason I don't think this deck can be... The reason I think this deck is top of Tier 3 and not bottom of Tier 2 is for the same reasons that I kind of said on the last video. When you're playing against something that's non-Bystial, the deck does kind of struggle, because in order to play the deck at a 40-45 card variant, I'd say 40-45, the sweet spot's like 43 to 46 for a lower card count version of this deck. If you're trying to play those versions, you have to cut non-engine hand traps in order to get your engine low enough to be able to do that. You're still going to be able to play like 6 to 8 of them, Like, you're going to be able to play your Maxis, your Ash Blossoms, maybe some Talents, Called Bys, whatever it is you want to play, maybe some Veilers, Gammas. You can still play that stuff, but you can't play nearly as many as you played in the previous version of the deck that didn't play the Bystials. Now, the Bystials make the deck better, 100%. It makes your engine stronger. But if you're playing against a deck that doesn't inherently lose the Bystials, your going second hands are already a little bit worse. It's not to say they're bad, because I know people are going to say in the comment section down below, like, no, like, you're wrong, this deck is really, really good. And it is. Tier 3 is a very, very good deck in this format. And that's something I literally just said I was going to talk about a second ago, but I didn't. Tier 3, these are decks that you know you're going to play against on the ladder. But you're not going to play against them like that. Like, you're going to play against them a lot on the ladder, but when you play against them, you have very clear ways of beating them consistently. Like, every single time you play against one of these decks, you know exactly how to beat it. So, with Branded, just Ash Blossom their freaking Branded Fusion and you're winning the game, right? This deck is limited in what it can do if you build your deck with Branded in mind, which everybody should be doing. With Dragons, you should also be building, you know, your deck with this in mind, and you can play around the Bystials fairly easily on not only on your turn, but also on your opponent's turn, right? And you can play around the different power cards that they have. I'm kind of rambling now, going into like more details about how to play around specific stuff, but this deck, a lot of times what it's going to establish, it loses super hard to Super Poly. That's something I should put out there. And Super Poly is one of the most popular cards in the game right now, because Branded's playing it, Tier's playing it, other decks can play it, not necessarily saying they are, but other decks can play it. And although this deck has got a very high power ceiling, it's the best combo deck in the game currently, it loses to a lot. And when it doesn't lose to a lot of stuff in the meta, it loses to itself a lot. Because if you are going for the more quote-unquote consistent versions, and I'm using air quotes to say consistent versions, like the 44 card variants, as opposed to the 60 card variants, you're going to be drawing your Garnets more often. Like, you're going to be drawing your Boot more often. You're going to be drawing your Beast and your Retribution, or not Retribution, your Regained, your, what's it called? Ravine, even though that's not really too much of a brick. You're going to be drawing your Driver, so on and so forth. If you go up to a 60 card variant, you're all of a sudden becoming less reliant on, you're becoming more reliant on getting lucky with drawing your really, really powerful cards, because as the deck is currently constructed, you want to see Lubellion and Seifert as much as possible. If you're playing the 60 card variant, you're going to see those just less often. Yes, you're going to be able to supplement that with cards like Grass, which are very powerful, but you're still not going to be seeing the cards you want to see as consistently as possible. So overall, there's just some like problems with this deck that I can't seem to get over. And this is coming from someone who literally mains this deck. Like, this is my favorite deck of, well, I wouldn't say of all time, but this is like one of my top 5 favorite decks of all time in Yu-Gi-Oh history. And I think loving it so much is helping me see some of the issues that the deck has, and why I don't think the deck can truly be like a top deck. It's going to be a really, really good deck, and you're going to see this deck on the ladder a lot. You're going to see it in tournaments a lot, but I don't ever think you're going to see it being like head and shoulders above everything else as the best deck. So, anyways, I'm sorry for like my 5-minute rant on Dragon Link, but moving on. That's what we get with some of these videos, so sorry about that. Dinos. So, Dinos are tough. I feel like you have to put Dinos in Rogue. I don't think you can put them anywhere else, solely for the reason, like the fact that you don't ever see this deck being played. In Season 18, I literally played against one Dino deck on my climb to Master 1. Like, just once, and I just cooked it, because Tier is insane. And I went first, I set up my Tier interruptions, and he just started playing, and he just couldn't play, basically. He had double Misk, and he still couldn't play. Like, because this deck is just stupid. You know, the Shufflers are insane is what I'm trying to say with that. Like, the Shufflers just destroy this deck, just like they destroy so many decks. But this deck is very unique in the sense that it can beat anything if it draws, like, Misk plus, you know, Ovi, or Misk plus combo in some sort of, you know, Misk plus Baby, Misk plus Ovi, Misk plus insert combo X, right? You can just obliterate anything if your opponent doesn't have the out to Misk. With that being said, it's so reliant on like 2 to 3 card combos that your opponent has no response for, that it just starts to struggle when you it has a hard time consistently beating everything, because it's so reliant on like 2 to 3 card combos and your opponent not to have the out. If your opponent's got called by, okay, that sucks. If they have a shuffler, okay, that sucks. If they have specific kind of interruptions, that kind of sucks, right? So overall, I love Dino. I think it's like a very powerful deck. It's got a very high ceiling, kind of like Adamantivator, but it just has like, it has a much lower floor than all this other stuff is what I guess I'm trying to say. Elemental Heroes, I'm sorry guys, this deck's so bad right now. The Bystials just destroy it. It's kind of nice, like, not gonna lie, it's kind of nice. Like, Plasma's insane. The little guy that locks you out of your opponent out of spells is kind of clean. There's like the OTKs are nice, Dark Law is nice, but DPE just gets destroyed by Bystials. A lot of the other parts of this deck get destroyed by Bystials. If this deck goes second, it basically auto loses unless you specifically build it to go second, which maybe you should be building it to go second. I don't know, but I don't know. Heroes is in kind of a rough spot, and they've released so much support for Heroes, and the problems just with this deck just still continue to exist in the same fashion. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe one day this can be good. Drytron, just like in the last video, it's essentially unplayable. I would say it's at the top of unplayable, but the reason it's here is because of Bystials. And Bystials aren't like super popular. Some people are playing 0 Bystials, Some people are also playing 8 Bystials. So going into ladder, like let's say you're in Master, say you're Master 5. You're going to play a game against a Sprite player who's not playing Bystials. Well, that's a bad example. Almost all Sprites playing Bystials. Let's say you're playing against Branded, and Branded's playing like the minimal Bystial package because they're trying to be consistent in other parts of the deck, which is currently what I'm working on in my Branded deck. I'm only playing the Sorrow and the Libellion for engine requirements. So let's say you're playing against me and you're playing Drytron. Yeah, you're going to combo my ass. You're going to destroy me. But then the next game, you're going to play against a Dragon Link. And they're going to be playing freaking 8 Bystials in their deck. Because not only do they dub as hand traps in certain matchups, but they also work as their engine. And you're just going to get absolutely cooked. So it's one step forward, one step back with a deck like Drytron on ladder. It's so inconsistent because it doesn't play into everything well enough. Which is kind of unfortunate. So for that reason, and also like you could easily just lose to me, like the Branded player that's only playing the 1 or 2 Bystials, because you could also just get hit by Maxi, get hit by Super Poly, right? And you're still losing that game anyways. So a deck like Drytron is just in a rough spot right now. If Tier is out of the format, then maybe this will come back. But until then, I think it's been a pretty rough spot. Exo, I'm going to put Exo at the top of Rogue now. I know Exo's definitely got its place in the format. You can definitely beat a lot of stuff with a deck like Exo Sister, but I think it's falling off because Tier is starting to fall off. The worse Tier gets, the worse this deck gets, because you had a big advantage playing into a field that was like 70% Tier with a deck like this, but now if you're playing into a field that's like 25% Tier, which seems pretty reasonable to me, maybe it's even less than that, then you're just going to be getting cooked by so many decks. And even Tier can play around this deck like fine. Tier doesn't have necessarily a losing matchup versus Exo. I would even say, like, I would take the Tier deck 60% of the time in the Exo matchup. Maybe that's me being stupid, I don't know. But overall, I don't think Exo has got what it takes right now to be higher than Rogue. I put it in Tier 3 last time because I thought Tier was going to kind of cement itself as clearly the best deck again. But it hasn't done that. Like, not directly. Like, it is the best deck, but it hasn't, like, established itself as the best deck, like, by a wide margin, like I kind of thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be, like, Sprite and Tier, like, Tier 1, best 2 decks in the game, then everything else. But now, it's more like Sprite, Tier, this, and this are all, like, really, really good, right? The difference between Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 is going to be very marginal, but, we'll see. The next deck is Floowandereeze. Now, I think Flunder is better than Exo, personally. I think it's better into Branded. I think it's better into decks like Sword Soul. I think it's better against Dragon Link, Tier, kind of Sprite. I think it's better against pretty much everything that Exo is across the board. However, This deck is obliterated by the ban list now. Like, its consistency is not really that good. One Impin does not seem like a big hit. Yes. But one Impin, one map, no terraforming. What else they got hit? One Prosperity. What else they got hit? Hopefully some other stuff. 2 Shifter, no Barrier Statue. All these little hits are starting to add up to get to the point where, like, if you get sacked by this deck, you just get sacked by it. But also, it's becoming easier and easier to deal with their deck, deal with this deck. If you're able to Smashers their Impin, well, maybe Smashers is not the best way to go about things. If you're able to just, like, well, Smashers does kind of work unless they have Toucan. You just gotta be able to stop the Toucan, right? But if you're able to get Impin off the board and into the graveyard, they have to resolve a stream and resolve a Toucan to get it back, which kind of sucks. So overall, like, this deck is just worse. And not to mention, I think these kind of decks are just worse in general right now, even though, like, Flunder is still like fairly strong. But anyways, I hope my logic kind of makes sense there. The next deck I want to talk about is Goaty. So Goaty is like the epitome of Rogue. I would actually... Is it better than Exo Sister? No, I'm not that crazy. I'm not that much of an Exo hater, am I? No, I'm not. Okay. I'm going to put it right here for now. Maybe it's probably worse than an Agnister. Yeah, it's probably worse than Agnister. The reason I really like this deck is because you can just play a bunch of, like, Floodgates, and no one knows how to play against it. You can play Shifter, you can play Macro, you can play Defissure. Those cards, like, inherently are, like, good for your deck. Not only are they, like, bad for a lot of other decks, but they're just good for your deck. The deck's not great, but you can steal some wins. Like, you can steal a lot of wins on ladder against, like, with this. It's not bad against other Sun decks necessarily because it does have some combo potential. It's pretty solid against a lot of the meta stuff because a lot of the meta stuff does rely on their graveyard. But it's not, like, as dependent on them being graveyard centric as, like, something like Exo Sister is. I still think Exo's probably overall better, but I think Goaty's, like, a very interesting anti-meta choice currently. The next deck is a Shizu Chaos. I would put this, like, right here with Adamancipator. It's a really good combo deck. It's very strong. If for those of you who haven't seen this deck, like, go check it out. It's like 60 card pile, Thunder Dragon, a Shizu tier, punk cards, just monstrosity of a deck. I literally played against one of these the other day, and I'm awful, and I'm just terrible at Yu-Gi-Oh! Sometimes. I'm learning Branded, like the new version of Branded right now. Like, I'm personally trying to learn. I know what the deck does, but I'm trying to learn the ins and outs of it a little bit more. So I'm playing it. I've been playing a lot more on ladder and in testing and stuff like that. And they max seed me, so I was like, all right. I lured and they max seed me, so they were trying to stop me from drawing into Called By or something. But I drew into, like, Branded Fusion, so I was like, you know what? Okay, I have a Maxi in my hand and a Cartesia and 2 other monsters in my hand. I'm just gonna summon Cartesia and pass. I'm not going to play into Maxi at all, and we're going to see what happens. I didn't know what they were playing, by the way. They start playing, and in my head, I'm like, okay, I can go Cartesia plus a monster in my hand into Grangoyle, into maybe some other crap later down the line if they summon, you know, if they use Infect to summon, then I can summon Upper Skinian and steal something they got, whatever. I also was like, okay, I can also go Cartesia plus 2 monsters in my hand into Guardian Chimera. And yeah, so those of you who know where this story is going, you know how bad I am already, but anyway, I'll get there in a second. They were playing a Shizu Chaos. So they started playing, they activated Sharon to summon itself, I maxied, they did not stop me, and they started playing with punk cards, and it very quickly became known to me that they were going to try to OTK me through Maxi. When they got to a choke point, so they did some punk plays, and I was there, they were at a choke point, I went Cartesia effect, summon Guardian Chimera with 2 monsters in my hand and Cartesia, and you can't Guardian Chimera effect because Guardian Chimera needs to be summoned by the effect of a spell to a fusion spell to get its, like, effect to pop and to draw. And I am just an idiot and just blanked on that for a second. It's the first time I've ever used Cartesia in that sense. So I just kind of blanked on it, right? But anyways, the point of the story is not to tell you how bad I am, which that is part of the point of the story because I do kind of suck sometimes. The point of it is, this asshole decked me out. He decked me out with Maxi, under Maxi. He summoned like 30 times in one turn. Now, granted, I also like powered through some of my deck with like I used 2 Alluras on my first turn and some other stuff to search. But he literally made me draw like 26 cards. So this deck has got a crazy high ceiling. And like he wasn't just like summoning like stupid stuff. He was summoning like really strong cards. Now, he wasn't able to beat over my Guardian Chimera because the deck does have problems like removing a card like Chimera. At least his version did, because he wasn't playing like the sprite cards. But he decked me out. Like, that's insane. So this deck definitely has like a ceiling to it. It's definitely got a high ceiling, but I think it's kind of like some of these other decks, and it's got a low floor, right? It does lose to a lot. It can struggle versus Maxi. It can struggle versus Bystials. It can struggle like versus a lot of hand traps. It can struggle when it doesn't draw very good because it's like a pile deck. You know, you're gonna brick just like 40 times, like 40% of your games you're gonna like draw a bad hand. So it's got its problems, but it's also got its really strong suits. So again, that was my very long-winded way of saying this is a rogue deck. Moving on to Labyrinth. So Labyrinth is unplayable, but the reason it's on here is because this deck is about to get really good when we get the Labyrinth support. So I'm actually going to rank this, as this is unfair as this may be. I'm going to rank this based on the new support that we know we're getting, as best I can to my knowledge, without any like knowledge of pre-hits or anything like that, which I don't think this deck is going to get hit outside of the Eradicator, which is not very much a real hit. That's terrible English, but it's not really a hit, but it's a little bit of a hit. It makes the combo less consistent because you have to search it now, pretty much. But anyways, this is going to be Labyrinth post the new cards. So like Big Welcome and then Lady, whatever her name is. I think this is going to be the best stun deck in the game. I think it's going to be top of Rogue, bottom of tier 3. I'm going to put it bottom of tier 3 for now. And this is because, yes, Ash Blossom does destroy it, but this deck plays trap cards that aren't floodgates better than any other deck in the game. And in a best of 1 format, you are inherently just going to win basically every single time you go first. When you go second, this deck can still play going second. It's crazy that this deck can still play going second, but it can. It can do it at a very high rate. You also have FTK potential with the hand loop, with the hand rip, with Eradicator and Lady or Lovely. So overall, this deck's got a lot of potential, and I think it's going to be very, very strong. I don't usually like stun decks, trap decks, but I think this deck's pretty cool, all things considered. The next deck I want to talk about is Live Twin Sprite. So this can be like Live Twin Runic Sprite or Live Twin Sprite, whichever version you want to play. I think they're about the same point. I think this is like one of the worst Sprite variations in the current format, because the Live Twin cards enable Scythe very easily. And if you're still going for that, that's fine, but that loses to Bystials pretty hard. If you're playing the Runic version, that's fine. This deck is strong. It's got a lot of potential. But this deck draws so many more bricks than the other Runic variations do, because this deck plays all the little Live Twin monsters and the Sprite monsters, with all of which you really don't want to draw after you've already comboed. Yes, you can make cards like Griffin, which are like insanely strong. You can make the Unchained Abomination. You can make the Trouble Sunny. You can make a lot of stuff in that deck that like normal Sprite can't. But overall, I think it's got too many like downsides for it to be like one of the better Sprite variations in the current format. So for those reasons, I think it's probably a tier 3 and the worst Sprite variation. Madolche, I think Madolche is actually a really strong option right now. The reason being, I'm gonna go a little bold. I'm gonna put this at the top of Rogue. I think this is a very, very, very interesting strategy right now. It has the ability to play the shufflers within its engine, which automatically make it very strong. So does Adamancipator, but a lot of times Adamancipator like loses to stuff that Madolche doesn't. And another thing that's really not taken into account on ladder is the knowledge people have about your deck. Nobody knows how to play against this deck. Like, barely anybody knows how to play against Madolche, and when you're playing on the ladder, that can be very beneficial. You can easily just steal wins because your opponent doesn't know what the heck they're doing against you. Yeah, overall, this deck is in a really good spot right now. I think the Vernasif thingies really help it. The Shufflers being in the game really help it. Its engine is, strong. It's got a strong engine. which is not the same. It's got a very strong engine compared to a lot of other things in the current format. So I'm really high on Madolche right now. So the next deck is Marincess, and I think Marincess is probably the best cyber strategy in the format right now. The reason being is because literally Bystials are useless. It can still put up a towers. It has a searchable imperm that makes your monsters unaffected. It's got incredible recursion. It's got access to Zelantis, which locks your opponent out of summoning because you literally like wipe the whole field and they can't summon anything back because that card's kind of broken and that interaction is stupid, but it's really cool. It's got a lot going for it. It can play a lot of hand traps. It can play whatever hand traps you want. It's not like locked into anything. I think Marincess is great right now, and I think it's super slept on. Mathmech is completely unplayable. It's probably more unplayable than Drytron, because at least Drytron has like lots of different targets you can hit where they have to hit with Bystials. But with Mathmech, like this deck can literally just like lose the one Bystial. Like you can just, your turn can just end the one Bystial. Yeah, it kind of sucks, but also doesn't really suck that much. This deck's pretty toxic. Runic Naturia. I think I maybe slightly underrated this deck last time, but I still think it's going to be like in probably the same. Well, it's in the same spot as it was before. I think it's around the same power level as Branded and Dragon Link. I think it's slightly better than the new Labyrinth. I think it's going to be significantly better. Maybe not significantly better, but better than the Live Twin Sprite or Live Twin Runic Sprite. The benefits of a deck like this are you have access to a lot of synchro options in your extra deck. You also have insane recursion. You have insane cards like Beast and Barkion, which are going to only get better the better traps get, like Labyrinth. It's got access to one of the best combos in the game. Like one of the best discard combos in the game is Hugin into Sacred Tree. Like that is just so good. You can play the millers, you can play the shufflers in engine. They're very, very strong. However, I don't think it's as good as the other runic variants. And the reason I don't think it is as good is because the Fur Hire cards and the runic cards increase the ceiling of the runic cards. Wait, what did I just say? The Fur Hire cards and the Sprite cards, I'm sorry, increase the ceiling of the runic cards by so much. You can combo with Hugin so much better in that deck than Naturia can with like Hugin, with Munin, or with Gary. You can combo with those cards fine in Naturia. Naturia uses them very, very well. But I don't think it uses them as well as the Fur Hire and the Sprite variants do. I might be wrong. I may be wrong. So I'm just putting that out there. But overall, I think the Sprite and the Fur Hire cards work better with the runic cards than the Naturia cards do. Not to say it's bad. It's still one of the best decks in the game, and if this deck wins a tournament or gets Master 1, I'm not surprised, like at all. But overall, I think the compatibility is a little bit better on the other variants. Pendulum Magicians, I'm literally just putting this on here just so I can talk about it for like one more time before Cashier comes into the format, if it does, and this deck is completely unplayable. This deck sucks. It's virtually unplayable. Yeah, it's just not very good. Bystial Punk Control. Bottom of tier 3, maybe? I think any Sprite variant is just better. I think Labyrinth's probably better when we get the support for it. Yeah, it kind of struggles because it's so linear. It's very linear. Not to mention, it also plays a crap ton of Bystials, but it doesn't use them as good as Dragon Link does. So if you're not playing against a deck that loses to Bystials, this deck is just flat out worse than Dragon Link. It's got a high ceiling. It's really good when it goes, when it works. When you draw the nuts, when you Chaos Ruler and hit Lebellion, you feel like you're the best player in the world. But that doesn't always happen, and when that doesn't happen, the deck kind of blows. Not gonna lie. But anyways, it's a pretty cool deck. I like it. The Assault Synchron. Yeah, Assault Synchron is really cool in it. I think it abuses Assault Synchron better than any other deck in the game right now. I think there are some Sprite variants that could use that card. Maybe some Dragon Link variants that could, but like nobody's really doing it. This deck can use it very well. And I think that is something to be said, because that card is broken. Like that. Assault Synchron is so good, and I'm surprised no one has broken it yet. But, yeah, time will tell. Rika. I put Rika in Rogue. I'm going to put Rika in Tier 3. I'm high on this deck. I think this deck is very strong. It's got one of the best going first combos in the game. The fact that it just has a 1-card combo, Loki, is just insane. You have access to cards like you have access to the Therion cards, which is insane. Con is stupid. Jasmine's broken. Like, Jasmine is just such an insane card. There's just so many really, really good cards in this deck, and it doesn't lose to Bystials. It can play around Maxi pretty well for the most part. It's very difficult to hand trap. A lot of times people that you're playing against are going to have no idea what the heck you're doing. They're not going to know how Con works. They're not going to know how Sheet works. They're not going to know how Princess works. And you're just going to just destroy people just because this deck is like so off the grid most of the time. So it honestly might be higher than this. It might be higher up on this list, but because it really hasn't proven itself, and you don't really see it much on ladder, I'm going to say it's like bottom of tier 3, but I think it has like the potential to be like up here, like around Runic Naturia. The next deck is Runic Plunder. So this is a deck that I talked about a little bit in my budget tier list video, my budget, my top 10 budget deck list, and this deck is really, really cool. I think it's a rogue deck for sure. I think it's probably top of rogue around the Madolche area. Anything that plays Runic is good. Just putting that out there. Runic is insane. Any deck that can play those cards is really, really good. The reason it works so well with the Plunder Patrol cards is because it gives you so much access to so much of your extra deck. You can synchro so efficiently when using the Runic cards, and also the Runic cards help you break boards, they help you set up boards, they help you with recursion, they make it so you're not as reliant on the field spell in Runic, which I think is called Shipyard. I might be mistaken on that. I don't know the names of these cards like super well. I'm still learning the deck. But also, you have the ability to play a lot of really cool non-engine. You've got the ability to play a lot of Kaijus, because they work very well with your Plunder cards. You have cards like access to cards like Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which are basically board breakers that no one plays really, so no one's going to be expecting it. People don't really play around cards like that. So overall, this deck's got a really high ceiling. The biggest downside to a deck like this is the fact that it is still relying on your opponent to a degree. Yes, you can play Kaijus to put monsters on your opponent's board to be able to play, but it is still relying on your opponent having monsters in some situations. So the ceiling is just inherently worse, inherently lower than, or the floor I should say, is just clearly lower than all other Runic variants, not named like Runic Stun, right? So, yeah. Anyways, I am going to be doing a deck profile and a more detailed guide on this because people seem to like that. So I will be getting that out soon, so stay tuned in to the channel for that. Salamangreat Great. I think this is probably, I think it's probably like right around the power level of Adignister. It might be a little bit higher, but I don't think it's as high as like Marincess. I think Marincess is clearly better than Salad. Now, this deck does have access to Bagooska, which is very, very strong, but overall, Salad, I think, is just not as good as Marincess. I don't know. Like, I think this deck is very solid, and you can play a lot of non-engine, you can play a lot of Bystials, you can play a lot of whatever hand trap you want, and it's very good. You can recycle Ash Blossom, which is absolutely broken. Rage and Roar are still very, very good cards, but I think it's got a lower ceiling than a deck like Marincess does, because Marincess, it has like nearly the same OTK potential as Salad does. Not quite as good, but it's also got like, I think, a more consistent turn 1 setup. It combos better off 1 card than Salad does. It can play the same amount of non-engine. It doesn't have better recursion and better like grind game, but it has just as good, if not a little bit better, than Salad. So overall, I think Marincess is just slightly better than Salad, but you know, this might not be. Maybe it's like right here. I don't know, but I'm just gonna leave it right here just for a dramatic effect. Whatever. Anyways, moving on to Sky Striker. This deck is also unplayable because Ray is a dark, and Bystials are in the format. Next up is Runic Furhire Sprite, and this is our first Tier 2 deck. So, I would say the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3 in my list is 1, the amount of times you're going to be playing against a deck on the ladder, and 2, whether or not that deck just directly can be card countered by a card or cards in your deck. Runic Furhire Sprite that's a mouthful sometimes, is overall, I think, better. Not you're going to see it more often than Branded or see it more often than Dragon Link or whatever, but it has less counterplay to it. There's less decks and less cards that just directly beat this version of Sprite than Branded. Branded just loses to Ash Blossom. So Runic Fire Sprite doesn't really have that. You know, you can play under Maxi very well. You can play under Ash Blossom very well. You can play under specific kinds of Floodgates very well. You can play around Bystials very well. Overall, this deck is just really strong, and you can also like avoid playing into Super Poly in a deck like this. So overall, this deck's got a really high ceiling, and it's one of the best Runic variants in the game. It's probably my favorite, if we're being honest here. If I'm being honest, it's probably my favorite because I think Rex is awesome. That card's so cool. Next deck is Runic Sprite. I'm going to put it right next to Runic Fire, and these are literally interchangeable. Like, which one do you want to play, and which one do you think is better? I personally think the Furhire variant's a little bit better, because I think it's got a higher ceiling than Runic Sprite, but that's only because when you open the Furhire cards, it's just so stupid. You just draw so many cards, and it's so hard for your opponent to beat that. But this deck still draws a lot too. You know, between Hyperia, Capshell, you still draw a lot, and you can have access to a lot of different really powerful cards. Fogo is also really good, Donna's really good, but these decks are pretty much neck and neck, and it's kind of pick your poison, like which one pick whichever one you prefer more. And also, if you don't want to craft Fossil Digs, I don't blame you, because I don't want to do that either. That's the only reason I'm not playing this deck like on ladder and have to play it elsewhere, is because I don't want to craft Fossil Digs. The next deck is Tearlament Sprite. This deck has fallen off a decent amount in my mind. Not that it was like super popular previously, but I thought it was better than it actually is. It's got a very high ceiling. It's probably got the highest ceiling of any like top tier deck in the game. The inboards this deck can pump out are just utterly ridiculous. But the problem is, it not only has the consistency issues of tier, but it also has like some other issues. It kind of amplifies those issues of consistency problems, because you're just adding more cards, like the Sprite cards, that don't directly help your tier engine like the Branded cards do. So it's just, overall, I think it's worse than just regular tier, because it's not as consistent as regular tier, and it's not as consistent as Branded tier. I do think it's probably slightly worse than these Runic variants, so I just wanted to put that out there. And you can notice this is because there's a little elf here on the bottom right. The next deck is Melffy Sprite. This is our second tier 1 deck. This deck virtually has no flaws. Like, this is like one of the most consistent, powerful decks in the game. It's very good going first. Its inboard going first is arguably the best inboard in the game. I don't think it's as good as the Runic variants, but it's comparable to those. It's also comparable to Branded tier, just regular tier. This has got the best inboard in the game, right, currently, of like the top tier decks. But it doesn't do it nearly consistently enough, and it loses to too much. Whereas Sprite, it's very hard to interrupt it. It's nearly impossible to interrupt this, and it's almost always going to end on Elf, IP, Melffy, plus Carrot or Red. So Herald of Arclight, plus a monster or a spell trap negate, plus a double cross or a Smashers, plus an Avermax, plus follow up. You're almost always going to end on that. And that's like, that just beats 99.9% of decks if they can't, like, most decks just can't play through that. No matter what deck you're playing, it's just almost impossible to play through that. It can struggle going second. It can struggle like breaking boards. It can struggle beating over stuff. But I don't think it struggles as much as like the Runic variants do to break boards. So for that reason, I think it's like very clearly better than the Runic variants. I like the Runic variants more. They're more fun to play in my mind. But I think the pure version, the Melffy version, has a higher ceiling. Spiral. This deck is also unplayable because Bystials absolutely destroyed this deck, and Maxi is a thing. Sword Soul, Protos is broken. This is clearly a tier 3 deck. It's clearly separated itself from like Exosister and Flunder as like quote-unquote anti-meta like combo decks. Not really combo decks. Like, this is like a mid-range deck that can stand alone outside of anti-meta, but you can also play like a super anti-meta strategy with Sword Soul. So the Bystials are good in it. Protos is stupid. It's overall just like a great option. I'm going to put it right here. I think it's better than Punk. This is just like a stun deck. Where does it goes here? Maybe it sucks because if this deck goes first, it's like it basically wins every single game. But if it goes second, it's really hard to win with this deck. It's really relying on drawing cards like Card Demise too. So moving on to Tearlaments. I think Tear is probably still one of the best decks in the game. I don't think it is the best deck in the game anymore. I actually think Branded Tear is. I think Branded Tear is the best deck, followed by Sprite, followed by Tear. Pure Tear, like a pure Shizu Bestial Tear, or whatever you're going to call it. The reason I think it's here is because it's so inconsistent. Like it's clearly one of the best decks in the game. And if someone said this is the order, or this is the order, or this is the order, or this is the order, like I would be cool. You're right. Yeah, you know what? I can concede like you're probably right. This is probably what I would order it in. But it's only because this deck is just so inconsistent now. Like it's so rough to play. And if you play the deck, you know what I'm talking about. If you play against it and you just get comboed, like it feels like you just get comboed every time you play against it, I feel your pain too. But if you play Tear, like you know what I'm talking about. This deck just loses to Ash or Imperm so frequently now, and it's kind of unfortunate because this deck's a lot of fun. But anyways, Tri-Brigade Sprite. So I think this is probably top of tier 3, because I had this in tier 2 last time, and that's because I thought it could like seriously compete with the runic variations for like the second best variant of Sprite, but the runic variations have kind of separated themselves a little bit, and also this deck got worse with the hit to jet than these did, because these decks only played like 1 or 2 jets anyways, whereas this deck played 3 jets. This deck also played 3 jets, but it has so many more consistency options than this deck does. So overall, I think this one got a little bit worse and these didn't. This might have also got a little bit worse, but not really, because who cares about 2 Swap Frogs and 2 jets in this deck? It's got so many freaking starters anyways. But yeah, I love this deck. I think this deck's really, really cool, but I think it's just slightly worse than the other Sprite variants we talked about. So anyways, that is going to do it for the tier list. This is the Season 19 ladder tier list for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Let me know in the comment section down below everything that I got right. Probably not going to be that much in your all's eyes. And everything I got wrong. Those are the most fun comments to read, honestly. So yeah, let me know everything I got right and wrong in the comments. Also, let me know what videos you'd like to see in the future. Stay tuned for a Runic Plunder video that will be coming soon, and maybe a branded tier. I don't know. That seems a little bit less important because everyone already knows what this deck does. But this deck is really cool, the Runic Plunder. So anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in the video. This was a bit of a longer one, so I hope you all enjoyed. And with that being said, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your day, if I get English. See ya. Peace.